Alright, so I was looking through my analytics and shit, and I saw both of these videos, and I honestly, I was really curious, to how wrong they're gonna be in these videos, but I haven't quite decided on which one I want to do. Because I know this one's gonna be, like, a complete dumpster fire. I know this one's gonna be a complete dumpster fire, um, in a train wreck, but I really want to see the arguments Ken Ham uses in this video. But I also really want the clickbait title for this one for how modern archaeology denies the Bible. So I think I'm gonna do both. I'm definitely not gonna look through the whole videos. Because that's gonna be like fucking 2 hours for this one and even longer for this one. So I'm probably just gonna do like the first like 15 minutes of each of these. And I'm gonna make 2 videos, I guess. Let's do this one.
Oh, why aren't they texting me back? Are they mad at me? Do they not like me anymore? I'm scared to ask for reassurance.
You know, it's interesting. I've traveled around the world for the past 40 years, and no matter what country I've gone to, even third world countries, when they hear that you're on about the Bible and Christianity, they ask the same basic questions. You believe the Bible? Wait a minute. We live in a scientific age. Science has disproved the Bible.
You know what I've found from responding to probably over 20 different videos from Answers in Genesis alone is that you guys typically use the same talking points that are always demonstrably untrue. Yay! Let's see how great these responses are. Sarcasm, guys. Sarcasm. Fuck my life.
Bible. There's no evidence for a flood. How could Noah get the animals on the ark anyway? What about dinosaurs? Didn't they live millions of years ago? Doesn't that disprove the Bible? Doesn't carbon-14 disprove
all of that? Yeah. I've actually proven most of those in other videos. Now they're spread out through other videos. I'm not gonna go and explain all that shit again. Just go find those videos. If the audio is fucked, I'm sorry. But I'll probably just do a quick rundown of why he's wrong on each of those points if he brings them up again.
The Bible? How do you know there's a God anyway? Or where did God come from? Science in this age has proved that the Big Bang is true and that we evolved from ape-like creatures. How can you believe the Bible? Who's heard questions something like that? You heard?
Not ape-like creatures. We are apes. We've evolved from apes. We are part of the great ape family. So, don't say we evolved from ape-like creatures when we are apes.
Those, yes, we have. But, you know, the problem is a lot of people don't know how to give that defense or give that answer. And so today's session, what I want to do is go through quickly and just give you an overview and show you how I would answer some of these questions. People often say, how do you know there's a God? Is there any evidence for an infinite God? You know what Romans 1:20 says? If you don't believe in God...
Once again, Scripture is not valid evidence. It just isn't. There is nothing to prove that it's like giving evidence. It's like your evidence needs evidence, you know? To use the Bible as evidence for something, you'd first need to prove it to be true with evidence. it's just, you can't do that because there's no way you can actually prove that it's true.
God, you're without excuse because it's so obvious that there's a God. Well, stand back for a moment and think, okay, so how could we defend that there's a God? I mean, what do we say? How can we answer the question,
Not using scripture.
how do you know that there's a God? Well, we can do all sorts of things. For instance, we could even look at the laws of logic and the laws of nature and the universe.
Logic is a very, very important tool, but logic can still give you a wrong answer if you start with false evidence.
Uniformity of nature. We could talk about that. That's a whole other area we could spend a lot of time on. But I specifically want to talk about this because here's a phenomenal piece of evidence that cries out to all of us that God created. DNA is that molecule of heredity that makes up our genes, our chromosomes. You know, it has all the information that builds a dog or a cat or an elephant, a human being. And you know, it's interesting. DNA was discovered by two famous scientists in England, Francis Crick and James Watson. They were both atheists. And they discovered the helical structure of DNA back in 1953. They put together this
An amazing discovery.
model. In fact, this is the original model that they put together. It's in a museum in London. And you know what they announced to the world? They said, guess what we found? There's no God. They said, as atheists, what they set out to do was to show that life is built on chemistry. Chemistry is just...
Okay, so I agree with the scientists. But I want to make it clear because people like to make excuses for the fact that we know that chemistry is the reason why we're alive, just by saying that God is the one who makes the chemistry work. But there's no evidence for that. That is just adding an assumption onto an already perfectly concrete theory.
Just matter that there is no God. This is the molecule of life. This is what makes life. DNA.
Found that Ken Ham specifically, and whoever the guy before was in the last video, they really like to just draw out their explanations for absolutely no reason. Like, just get to the point, dude. Get to the point. So many of the words that you are saying right now are just time filler words. They're just words that you keep saying just to fill the gap in, like, time. Like, why are you trying to make your videos needlessly long? Why are you trying to make your lectures needlessly long? There's no reason for it. Stop.
There's no God. It's just molecule. Complex molecule is just a molecule. Well, you know what's interesting? We've done a lot of research since then. And you know what we found? DNA is not just matter. You know what DNA is? It's actually...
What the fuck do you mean? Well, yeah, it's not just matter. It's matter and energy. But, like... what are you trying to get? Oh my god, these people. They try to make everything so grand, and then, like, they try to make everything they're saying so grand, and try to explain atheist talking points in the most bland and just uncompelling way. It's so dishonest.
A complex information system and a language system. Help us understand. Here's a piece of rope that has red and blue beads on the rope, and those red and blue beads spell out the word help. You all agree with that?
Okay. Once again, DNA is not a language. That is an analogy to help people understand how DNA works. But no model is, like, perfect. No model is perfect. That applies to that analogy as well. The analogy is not perfect. DNA is not a language. That is just a way that people explain it to people who don't know anything on the topic. It is not a perfect one-to-one comparison of how DNA works. It's just a building block to teach people the basics. It's like how in school they teach you the basics, and then later on they teach you to unlearn the basics because those basics are not fully accurate enough for the higher levels of math.
Not sure? If you know the Morse code, they spell out the word help. If you don't know the Morse code, you have red and blue beads on a rope. Okay? The beads, when they're arranged into a particular order and you know the language, you can get the information that's there, the word help. DNA is sort of like that. As an analogy, DNA is like a couple of pieces of rope and has these beads on it, these molecules, base pairs. You don't have to worry too much about that. And they...
Why the fuck are you comparing a dumbass analogy for how Morse code works to a really fucked up, like, diagram of what DNA looks like? This is really fucking stupid, because the top one, the beads up there, that's not what Morse code looks like. That's not the form it takes in an actual professional setting. We're not putting beads on a rope to do Morse code. We're typing dots and dashes. And this down here, I'm pointing at my monitor as if you guys can see that shit. This down here, this is not what fucking DNA looks like. Why are you doing weird circles with letters in them to show what nucleotide bases are in there? To fucking... And comparing it to a completely just inaccurate, childish fucking... Like, this is how you would explain Morse code to a fucking child, is beads on a rope. That's not how that's done in a professional setting at all. And the DNA down here, this is also a very childish fucking, I guess, infographic. I don't really want to call it an infographic because it's really basic, but like honestly, you're comparing Morse code with an analogy that is not completely inaccurate, but slightly inaccurate to a picture of that's supposed to display only a small portion of what DNA actually is. Comparing this to, like, imagine, like, the actual explanation of DNA is below this. Comparing this up here, the top of this, to the very bottom where that is the actual explanation of what DNA is just completely dishonest. It's completely dishonest. Because you're making, like, a triple false equivalency. You're making a false equivalency between fucking Morse code and the bead analogy, and you're making a false equivalency between this dumbass infographic and the actual explanation of DNA, and then you're making a false equivalency between the two false things. It's so stupid and dishonest. Like, holy mother of God. Oh my God. It's so bad. It's so bad. And the fact that the literal adults in your audience don't see that is just maddening to me. Because that's what happens when you're taught about fucking, like, taught really poorly from a really young age, is you never learn to actually question the things that you're looking at. Oh my god. I think this is honestly the stupidest, most brain-dead thing I have ever seen in any of these videos. Like, I get mad at regular false equivalency, but this is like taking 4 different things that are not the same at all. Not the same at all. And then drawing lines connecting all of them together. It's just fucking brain dead. Wow. Oh my god. I'm sorry for the tirade, but dear Lord. Oh, wow. Okay. Let's try to continue this video. Holy shit.
All the information on how to build a human being, how to make your heart and your brain and your kidneys, all the engineering diagrams, all of the biochemistry, all the chemical pathways, incredibly complex. It's like a whole library of books with all this information in them.
You were doing so well. You were doing so well. You were explaining how DNA works adequately. You were doing it adequately until you made a fucking why? Why? It's not a library with books. That's not how that works at all. Like, you are honestly so far from what you were just saying that honestly, I don't know if I can continue this video. Oh my god.
And you know, it's interesting. When I went to university, my professor did an experiment. He said, look, I'm going to show you that there's no God and that life could arise by natural processes. He said, let's take the letters of the alphabet and put them in a hat. One of the things I didn't know.
What do you want to bet that this was like 30 years ago? What do you want to bet that this was like 30 years ago? Was this what they were referencing in the other video as well? Putting a bunch of letters into a hat and then... sorry. Putting a bunch of letters in a hat and taking out the letters in random order and seeing if it forms a word. Because it would make sense if that was a thing that they did like 30 years ago. Because fucking creationists love to bring up like information from like 30 years ago as if we haven't refined those methods since then. Oh Lord, there was one that they were mentioning like shit from like I think it was the moths. I think it was the moths. They were trying to say that the moths were, like, completely disproved everything about how natural selection works. Even though they proved it adequately. They didn't do the best job, but they did an adequate job, and the fucking creationist was going on and on about how this is not good enough, this is not good enough, as if we haven't refined those methods since then. Like, yeah, it probably wasn't good enough on its own at the time to completely prove natural selection, but we have done way more experiments since then. We have refined that experiment. Like, we have gained knowledge since these things that they're mentioning that happened in the 20th century, like, fucking creationists like to go, oh, look at this, this thing happened right as we were starting to research this, and they didn't do this in the perfect way they could possibly have done it, so this means that it's all false. And it's like, dude, shut the fuck up, sit down, and do a better job of listening.
Ask is, where did the letters come from? But we'll ignore that. Okay, so we put them in a hat, and then he passed the hat around the class and said, I want you by chance to pull out letters. And 3 students in a row pulled out B-A-T. Ah, we got a word. Bat. Given enough time, we could get more words. Given enough time, we could actually think about it, even though it seems remote, but you could get sentences. Given enough time, you could get the encyclopedia.
I want you to remember that, and I only use natural selection because that's the only one I know. But it also seems like it's the only one that the fucking theists know as well. Well, I shouldn't say the fucking theists because that includes me. The young Earth creationists. They seem to only know about natural selection, so I'm gonna talk about natural selection. And so I want you to remember that natural selection is non-random selection of, like, a randomized thing. So it's not gonna be like it's not gonna be like we take a bat and then we get all these words and then we just throw them back in the hat. If you take that word, bat, and then you have no other words, you take all of the random letters that never formed a word, you put them back in the hat, and then you pull them out in random order again, you're bound to get more words. And if you keep those words and throw the random letters back in the hat, again, you're gonna pull them out and eventually get more words if you have enough letters in the right amount of letters to do that. But think about if you already have a bunch of words, right? You already have a bunch of words and you have them in like a line, right? You have all the words in a line. And then you took a couple letters from a few of the words. You put them back in the hat, and then you shuffled them around, and then you brought them back out. You might find that you made a couple different words in that line of words. A word might have fused, like 2 words might have fused together because the letters line up to form a different, bigger word. Or you could have a situation where you took a letter from a bigger word, it came out, you split it into 2 smaller words. And at the end of the day, the ones that stick around are the ones that are beneficial, the ones that create the beneficial structures. It is a decent analogy. I'll give it that. But Ken Ham isn't explaining it in a way that it actually decently explains how natural selection works.
Idea Britannica. See, you don't need God. It just so happened that millions of years ago, in just the right conditions at the right...
No, that's not how that worked. The chemicals that form life are naturally attracted to each other. They are naturally attracted to each other in a way that it would make it so that it's almost inevitable that under the proper conditions, under the right conditions, it is pretty much inevitable that life will form. He is leaving out that it's less chance. It's less chance, and more that these chemicals and the elements to make the chemicals are all naturally attracted to each other. They all naturally gravitate towards each other. And I want to make clear, I'm using gravitate in a way that does not reference the theory of gravity. It's a different definition. That they naturally gravitate towards each other to form life.
Right time, the right molecules came together, DNA, life, bang, it all evolved, there's no God. You know what I didn't ask my professor at the time? That word BAT, is it a BAT to a Dutchman or a Chinese or a Japanese, or who's it a word to? You realize it's only a word?
Okay, so he is bringing up that obviously languages need a medium that is the language, and it needs a structure, which is the characters or the letters that make up the words. But the issue here is that that's not how DNA works. And that's also not how the basic first single cellular organisms worked either. The way life formed was because these chemicals that are naturally attracted to each other, they join together to create a very specific structure that has specific properties. And it does a specific thing because of the way that it's arranged. And that may sound very similar to the structure and medium that is how a language is formed. But I want to make it clear that technically the medium for how those things work is literally the forces of the universe. So yeah, you could make an analogy there, but he's not mentioning any of the important equivalents.
Word to somebody who has the language. See, if you look at my Bible here, it's in English, but if this Bible was in Russian, I wouldn't be able to read it because I don't know Russian. It needs to be in English, and I need to know the English language to read it.
Yeah, because you don't have the medium. You don't have knowledge of the medium, and thus you cannot decipher the structure.
This. You know, the other interesting thing is that I can read this and get information, but the information is really not on the page. Actually, the information comes because there's ink arranged into letters that are arranged into words that are arranged.
Yes, the formation that happens to be in a medium made from a medium that you also have, and thus you can decipher it.
Into sentences, and because I have the language, I can read that and get the information, but actually information is immaterial. You can't read the word help without the language. Actually, DNA is like that. Do you realize that DNA is like all this information, but you know what else? You got to have the language to read DNA, so DNA itself has the information to make the language to read the DNA. It's all got to be there.
No! I want you... Oh my god. The thing making the words needs to have the medium. The thing deciphering the words also has to have the medium. The words do not need the medium. But for the words to actually do something, the medium has to be involved. But I want to make it clear, the medium is the forces of the universe. They exist constantly. They exist constantly. You may not have the medium. Doesn't matter. The medium is still present.
or it won't work. Now, Dr. Werner Gitt, who's a German scientist, he wrote a book called In the Beginning Was Information. And in that book, he says this: there is no natural law through which matter can give rise to information. Now, stop right there for...
Bullshit. Bullshit. I just, Werner Gitt. Werner Gitt. Gitt is a German engineer and young Earth creationist. Yay! Idiots citing idiots. I want you to see this. I want you to see German engineer. That means this man is not a biologist. He is not qualified to speak on this topic. He is not a valid source for this topic. German engineer. Not a biologist, people. A German engineer.
For a moment. Life is built on information. Do you know how many bits of information there are in living things?
He also is not a physicist. Which I assume when he says natural law, he is referring to, the forces of the universe. He is not a physicist. He is neither a physicist nor a biologist. What makes you think that he is an authority figure on this topic?
On this earth, it's not millions, it's not billions, it's zillions. I mean, it is uncountable for us. The amount of information in DNA on living things on this earth is absolutely extraordinary. Do you know what Dr. Gitt is saying? There's not one instance where matter has ever produced one bit of information by itself.
Bullshit. Well, yeah, you just said by itself. So yeah, it's possible. Oh my god. It's possible with multiple atoms. In fact, I'd be willing to say it needs many atoms, but it's still possible.
That means life could not have arisen by natural processes. Whatever.
That is not what that means. Well, that's what the book means. But that's not true at all. The book was made by somebody who is not an authority figure on the subject, who did not actually, go to college for the subject. He is an engineer. He is not qualified to talk about physics or biology as an authority figure on either subjects.
Evolutionists believe, they don't just believe that one kind of animal changed into another, they have to believe that matter produces information and that originally...
No! The medium and the structure... The medium stays the same. The structure changes. If a bunch of words in your sentence change, it's going to be a different sentence than before, jackass. Oh my god.
Matter produced information and a language system to form life, and over millions of years you produce more and more information to get the zillions of bits of information.
Not more and more. Not more and more. A difference in the words that are being said makes a different sentence as a whole.
People, you know what this really says? Evolution is ridiculous. It's absurd. No wonder the Bible says, if you don't believe in God, you're without excuse. DNA.
Think about it this way. Think about it this way. If you have if you equate the nucleotide bases to letters, you take the letters, and you know what? I think there are only 2 possible nucleotide pairings, aren't there? There's 4 bases and only 2 possible pairings. So you can equate this to binary. You can equate this to fucking, what's it called? Dots and dashes, that one. No, that sounds so stupid, I need to actually think of the word. Morse code, there we go. You can equate it to Morse code because it's only 2 possible things. Those 2 in a certain sequence makes a specific letter. A bunch of letters in a sequence makes a word. A bunch of words in a sequence makes a sentence. And you put a whole bunch of sentences together, you get a paragraph. You put a bunch of paragraphs together, and you get fucking, I don't know, a page of a book. You put a bunch of pages together, you get a book. If you change just a couple words in that book, or you know what? We can even say if you change even a couple of those base two characters, you can go and you can change a small part of that book. You know what happens if you do that over and over and over for all of eternity? Eventually, you're going to have a whole different book. Eventually, if you keep changing letters, you're going to start changing words. If you start changing words for a while, you're going to find that you're changing sentences as well. And so on and so forth. Until you have a completely different book. Or in DNA's case, a completely different creature.
It actually cries out to us, in the beginning God created. I was at one particular conference and
Scripture is not valid evidence. You almost snuck that past me. You almost did. I almost didn't catch that one.
somebody said to me, yeah, but wait a minute. You Christians have a blind faith that there's God. Well,
Yeah.
actually, no. It is
Bullshit.
a faith, but it's not a blind faith. You know who has the blind faith? The atheists. Richard Dawkins.
Bullshit! God, I fucking hate when they do that. I hate when they go, no you, when they have no grounds for it. I fucking hate it. I fucking hate when they do that. Because they do it in such a condescending way. They do it like being condescending and smug is... They act like that makes it true. They act like that makes it true without the need for fucking evidence. And it's so annoying.
You know why? Richard Dawkins says there's no God, which flies in the face of what we know from
Oh my god. There is no... Oh my god. The burden of proof is on the one making the claim, not the one saying they don't believe the claim. You having no proof is why we say we don't believe the claim. That is why. There is no claim being made by atheists. There is no claim being made by me when I say I don't believe your God exists. There is no claim there. I am just saying that your evidence is not sufficient for me to believe it. There is no claim there. Now, if I were to say, there is not enough evidence for your God, therefore nobody should believe it, that is a claim. Then I would have to prove that you do not have evidence. But I'm just here to point out that absolutely none of what you are saying is valid evidence. So yeah, I'm here to do that. Absolutely nothing you have said in this video has been at all compelling with any ounce of evidence.
Chemistry about DNA. So actually, when you look at DNA, it actually confirms in the beginning God. Doesn't prove.
In what way? In what way? I'm gonna let that play again. Because I paused you midway through. But I'm gonna say to my viewers that if he says something that has absolutely no evidence, you owe me at least a subscription. Come on, do it.
What we know from biochemistry about DNA. So actually, when you look at DNA, it actually says there's no God, which flies in the atheists. Richard Dawkins. You know why? Richard Dawkins says there's no God, which flies in the face of what we know from biochemistry about DNA. So actually, when you look at DNA, it actually confirms in the beginning God. Doesn't prove it, because ultimately...
So basically, he's using all of what he just said about it not being possible for information to arise from anything without intelligence, which he gave no evidence for to begin with, no valid evidence, so you owe me a subscription. You, viewer, I don't know who you are, I don't know what your name is, your name could be Greg, for all I know, but you owe me a subscription.
Can't absolutely prove these things because we're finite beings and we don't have all information. You know, that's why...
Oh my fucking god. So, basically, he's saying the gaps of our information, because we don't know, therefore God must. So, a God of the Gap situation. Yay.
There's always going to be a faith aspect. Young people, I often have people, I go to churches or I teach in schools, and they'll say to me, well, prove that there's a God. See, here's the thing. You can't ultimately, as a human being, a finite human being, prove those things in an absolute sense. Only God can.
Yes, you can. That is what science is for. You absolute fucking Nimrod. The whole advantage to our species as a whole is generational learning, because we can prove shit and pass it on to the next generation for them to prove it further. I hate when Christians go and they say, oh, well, humans are so special because God, but atheists and scientists say that humans aren't special because God doesn't exist, and they're completely throwing out the real reason why humans are special, and that is generational learning. Anyways, I'm gonna end this video here. Didn't even get like 13 minutes in, it's already 40 minutes, or is that 40? I can't see that. It's like fucking 4 pixels tall. Anyways, you owe me a subscription. Subscribe, bitches. Bye.